Hey friends, welcome to or welcome back to my channel. My name is Kayla and thank you so much for clicking on this video. I don't know about you guys, but I've had a lot of free time during quarantine, so I've been reading a lot more than I normally do, and I've also been watching a lot of YouTube videos about what other people are reading or plan to read, and I just thought it'd be fun to film my own video about what I've been reading and what I plan to read during the rest of all this corona craziness. I personally am not a big fan of long intros, so let's just go ahead and get into the video. So the first few books that I'm going to be sharing with you are books that I've already read during quarantine, and then I'm also going to share books with you that I'm currently reading, and then the books that I plan to read during the rest of all this stuff. So this first book is one that I feel like everybody and their mom has already read, and I'm very late to the game with this book, but it is The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn. I actually found this at Goodwill, I want to say probably about 6 months ago, and I put it on my bookshelf and never really thought much of it, but then I saw a few of the YouTubers that I watch talking about it, and I was like, hey, I have that, I might as well read it. And I'm also a little ashamed to admit that this is my first thriller book that I think that I've ever read. I thought that it was fantastic. It was a page turner. I didn't see the plot coming at all. The ending blew my mind. I really couldn't sleep after I read it because I read it late at night and it just kind of spooked me out a little bit. So if you're gonna read it, I would recommend reading it during the daytime, or maybe if you have somebody with you. I don't know, it made me feel a little uneasy after I finished it. So as the title would say, it's about a woman in a window. It follows this lady who kind of goes through some trauma in her life, and it inhibits her from being able to leave her apartment for an entire year. So she watches her neighbors out of her window, and she kind of takes a liking to a family that moves in across the street from her in New York City, and she has some encounters with that family, and then something happens in the family's house that she sees across the street, and since she has the inability to leave her house, she is on a lot of drugs to kind of help her with the mental illness that she's facing, not being able to leave her house. So she doesn't know if what she saw happen is something that happened in real life or something that she kind of fabricated in her mind, and the story follows her trying to figure out if it was real life or wasn't real life. If we're gonna rate books based on Goodreads ratings, I'm gonna give this book a 5 out of 5. I honestly thought it was fantastic, and I would read it again, even though I know what's gonna happen. So this next book, I feel like I was also a little late to the reading game when it came to this one, but it has definitely made one of my top 5 favorite books. I think that it is incredible, and it is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. It is such a phenomenal book. So basically, it follows a girl named Kaya, and she is growing up in a town in North Carolina, but instead of living in the actual town part, she lives in a shack on the marsh. And the people in that town think that she's beneath them, that she's stupid, that she just doesn't belong there because they live in, you know, the sophisticated town part, and she lives in a shack on the marsh. 2 boys from this town sort of take a liking to her, they're drawn into her. One teaches her how to read and like has really good intentions for her, and the other one, we're not really sure what his intentions are. And then something happens to one of the boys, and I'm not really giving any spoilers away because it's written in the summary of the book right here. One of them ends up turning dead, and Kaya is unfortunately involved in the investigation of his death, so it follows trying to figure out if she's guilty or not. And I'm gonna read the last paragraph of the summary because I think that it kind of sums up the feelings that you get from this book pretty well. Where the Crawdads Sing is at once an exquisite ode to the natural world and a heartbreaking coming-of-age story, and a surprising tale of a possible murder. Owens reminds us that we are forever shaped by the children we once were, and that we are all subject to the beautiful and violent secrets that nature keeps. It's just a beautiful story. It is incredibly well written, and it's also a page turner. Rating this on a Goodreads scale as well, I would give this book a definite 5 out of 5. I would give it more than 5 stars if I could. The next book is Relationship Goals by Michael Todd. I will say that this is a faith-based book, so do with that what you will. Michael Todd is a pastor at Transformation Church, and he is just such an incredible speaker and pastor, and I just find so much inspiration from him and his stories. So this book is broken down into about 8 different chapters, and it can cover any aspect of any type of relationship. So don't feel like you can only read this book if you're wanting to know more about romantic relationships. It involves familial relationships, friendships, romantic relationships, obviously. If you have any type of any relationship with anybody, I would recommend reading this book. I'm basically forcing all of my friends and family to read this book because I think that it is so incredible. I feel like if you are watching this video, obviously you like reading books, but if for some off chance you don't like reading books, He also has a series on YouTube. It's about 8 episodes long, and I think each episode is about 45 minutes to an hour. Each episode basically covers each chapter of this book. And I will say that the way that he speaks and preaches just makes you feel something. And even if you are going to read this book, I would still recommend watching the YouTube series, just because he just makes you feel something, and he has so much knowledge to share. And I just think that it is an incredible book. I already said that, but I just want to get the point across that I think this is incredible. So now we're jumping into books that I am currently reading. I'm currently reading 2 books, and the first one is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. And if you happen to not know, Suzanne Collins wrote the Hunger Games trilogy, and this book is basically the Hunger Games from President Snow's perspective when he was younger, before he became president, obviously. So I think this takes place on the 10th Hunger Games, so the Capitol is still trying to figure everything out in regards to the Hunger Games. It's still relatively new, so they're in like a trial and error type of period. So Snow is a student at, I guess, what would be like considered high school in the Capitol. Him and his classmates are each assigned a tribute from the various districts, and he gets assigned the girl tribute from District 12. And Snow, basically, as her mentor, has to do what Haymitch did for Katniss in the Hunger Games and try to get her sponsors and help her basically survive the Hunger Games and give her tips and stuff like that. I will say I went into this book, I didn't read anything about it. I thought that it was going to be from Haymitch's perspective when he was in the Hunger Games, so I was really pumped for it because Haymitch is one of my favorite characters from the Hunger Games trilogy. And then I started reading it and it said Coriolanus, and I was like, oh, it's President Snow. I was a little bummed, I'm not gonna lie, just because who likes Snow? Like, if you read the Hunger Games trilogy, I feel like you don't like Snow, so why would I want to read a book about him? But I kept reading it, and I have to say I actually am enjoying it. It is obviously not as good as the Hunger Games because it just can't be, but I will say that it is kind of giving me a soft spot for Snow. I still don't like him, but I don't hate him as much as I did before I read this book. I'll say this, if you are a big Hunger Games fan, which I was the biggest Hunger Games nerd. I think I've read those books like 5 times over. But yeah, if you're a big Hunger Games fan, I would recommend reading this book. Give it a try. I went into it not thinking I would like it, and I'm actually enjoying it. So I feel like there's hope. And the second book I'm currently reading is Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. And do I want to spill the beans on myself? Yeah, I will, I don't care. I haven't read the Harry Potter series before. This is my first time, so I'm on the 5th book, and I don't know why I didn't read them when I was younger. I don't. I loved them so much. I will say that my boyfriend and I have watched all of the movies. I started off, I read book 1, I watched movie 1, I read book 2, I watched book 2, but then after the 3rd movie, I just wanted to know what happened, so I just kept watching the movies and kept reading the books at the same time. Is that shameful to say that I watched the movies before I read the books? But anyways, I'm reading the 5th book and I am loving it. I don't know what else to say. It's Harry Potter. If you haven't read it like me, you should start reading it. I think that it is really, really good. Good synopsis, Kayla. So these next books are ones that I plan to read after I finish reading the 2 that I'm currently reading. And the first one is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I'm not ashamed to say that I watched the series on Hulu before I'm reading this book. I thought that the series was really good. I think that it is very unsettling in some parts of the series. Like, I had to watch something happy afterwards because I think that the series is just very heavy. But I typically like to read books about series that I've already watched, but I didn't know that this was a book before I watched the series. Anyways, I want to read this because I've watched the series. So basically, if you don't know what The Handmaid's Tale is about, it is a post-war United States, sort of, and it's not called the United States anymore, it's now called Gilead. And something happened that left a lot of the women infertile. There's like a very few amount of women that are still fertile, and they become the handmaids. And the people who are sort of the like top 1% of the population who like have the most money and are the most in control become commanders, and each commander is assigned a handmaid. Essentially, the commander has to get the handmaid pregnant even though the commander has a wife, and the baby that the commander and the handmaid have together will be the commander and the wife's baby, and the handmaid will move on to somebody else to have a baby for them because the wives are infertile and aren't able to have their own babies. So as you can imagine, it's quite messed up. It basically is requiring a woman to have a baby and then just give it up like it's nothing. So people are trying to break free from this world. Obviously, why wouldn't they want to break free from this world? But it's kind of hard to do so. I don't know how to say anything without giving too much away. And obviously, I've watched the series, but I haven't read the book. So I'm wondering if it'll be different in the book than it is in the series, because I feel like there are always some like discrepancies between movies and books. I'm excited to read this one. This one I've had on my shelf for a really long time, and I just haven't read it, and I don't know why, but it is Tweak by Nick Sheff. Its counterpart, called Beautiful Boy, was made into a movie. Beautiful Boy is a more like scientific, and it kind of describes what is happening inside of a person's brain when they do drugs, and Tweak is more from the perspective of the person that is actually doing the drugs and the struggles that they're facing and what's going on inside their head. So the little summary of the story in the book says, in a voice that is raw and honest, Nick spares no detail in telling the compelling, heartbreaking, and true story of his relapse and his journey toward recovery. So he became drunk for the first time at the age of 11, and he kind of just went down a downward spiral from there. And this book just kind of covers his story and what happened to him and how he was able to take a path toward recovery. Okay, we're nearing the end here. I only have one book left. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching this far. I know it's probably 12 years long and I'm really sorry. I just talk a lot and I have a hard time not talking. But the last book that I want to read is the Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. Oh my god, I love the cover of this book. I love when they're like textured like this. Do you guys know what I mean? You can like just feel it. Oh. These are always my favorite types of covers. I'm not good at explaining what this book is about, so I'm just gonna read the synopsis to you. I'm sorry that I have to do this. I know it just feels like you could go read this on your own. Why am I watching this video? But I feel like I won't do it justice if I don't read the synopsis. So, the classic has entertained and enlightened readers the world over with its sly and ironic portrayal of human life and foibles from the unique vantage point of Screwtape, a highly placed assistant to, in quotation marks, our father below. At once wildly comic, deadly serious, and strikingly original, C.S. Lewis gives us the correspondence of the worldly wise devil to his nephew Wormwood, a novice demon in charge of the securing of the damnation of an ordinary young man. The Screwtape Letters is the most engaging account of temptation and triumph over it ever written. So it's another faith-based book, and I wanted to read what the New York Times book review had to say about it because it's written on the back of the book, and I think that it will describe it pretty well. It says, C.S. Lewis is the ideal persuader for the half-convinced, for the good man who would like to be a Christian but finds his intellect getting in the way. So I have personally been trying to read more of my Bible, and I'm doing a daily devotional, and I'm just trying to spend more time with God during this time because I think that I need to be closer with him, and I've kind of put it on the back burner in the past, and there's really no better time than right now to just put all of my effort into it because I have nothing to distract me. And I think it'll teach me that even when I do have distractions, I still need to make time for him. If you made it to the very end of the video, thank you so much for watching. If you liked what you saw, please feel free to subscribe. If not, it's totally fine. I kind of get it, but I really do hope to see you in the next video. Thanks so much for listening to me rant for way too long about books. Bye, friends.